Hello, my friends. Welcome back again. Um, let's do a quick recap. This will be part 5 of this series, I believe. So, quick recap. On the last episode, we finished off. We were reviewing the continuation of three sons of Noah after the flood, what regions they went to, descendants from there. We looked at how the evil of old managed to make it through to the after of the flood, where that same evil made it back into the world to begin corrupting the world again. And that in our current context, in the biggest sphere, Christianity, that correlates to signs and symptoms of the second coming or the return of Christ will be when the times of the world appear as they did in the days of Noah. So, again, another reason why we're contrasting and going back to look for more information in the last video. So, we went back, we went through books that are included in the Ethiopian Christian Bible that are not in the 66 canonical books. And we found a whole lot of extra information there that really ties in a lot of details, gives us a lot better understanding of the regions, how each group got there, what the sons did that caused the infamous curse of Ham, and so on. We clarified some of that based on those books. And again, none of this is to draw a conclusion for you. I don't want to sell a conclusion either. I just want to present you with information that you might not have had access to or might not have seen yet. So if there's any holes in your understanding, you can at least have something that you can reflect on. And if it fits for you, it fits for you. If not, test all things, keep what's good. So definitely don't want to conclude anything for you. I just want to present you with I just want to present you with the research as I encountered it. So as I went through trying to look for more information, I just compiled as I went. And so I'm just kind of showing you the trail of evidence as I found it. So definitely don't want you to draw any conclusions from my words. Definitely do your own research and, keep what is good. So, summarizing that, we also looked at the idea that based on the type of things that were happening in the days of Noah, we're thinking there's got to be some level of technology that would probably be quite significant for things to have gotten to that point. And we looked at how that technology might have accumulated over time, and that it was actually provided to humans by the Watchers, and that technology eventually led to unnatural things that required a cleanse of large proportion. So, in a nutshell, that kind of summarizes where we went in the last episode. If you haven't seen the ones before that, you probably should, because if you don't, this will look like it's going all over the map. So, to move it forward from here, with all that in mind and what we looked at regarding ancient historical resources and information and where it led us to, again, a lot of this is, and I'm going to tie this back to something real quick, that was actually in episode 1, which was, this is kind of where we started, was looking at the eclipse, the maps, the biblical cities and towns and names, and how this all got correlated into something that a lot of people were expecting something to occur, right? So, based on those biblical connections. So, the reason I want to reflect back to that is, right, this is all starting here, but it takes a long route through our history, technology, hidden history, lies, all sorts of things, and then comes all the way back and circles around to itself in bizarre ways that blew my mind, and I'm going to literally walk you through it to the point. But point being that, again, no conclusions to be drawn here. I just want to present a different interpretation based on evidence that's available. So, again, all of these different ideas that we're talking about, as far as biblical and ancient biblical text, script, scrolls, and any other ancient documents, we have to look at them a little differently, and we have to weigh them a little differently because we don't have verifiable fact that we can rely on in a historical reference sense. So, not necessarily trusting everything that we're getting from the mainstream narrative, but also keeping in mind that these ancient books have also been translated, revised, tampered, and so on. The whole of this, like I said, days of Noah, things that were happening at that time, correlations to now, and all of these towns and cities for the eclipse correlating to a second coming of Christ. And that the story of Noah and the correlation and carry forward all the way today, if that is the time period in Revelation that is being attributed, that's what it's correlating to, is signs of the second coming, if you will. So, in general, these ideas are all based on that we are in a certain time in the book of Revelation, which would be known as the tribulation. So all these signs and key notes correlate to revelations in tribulation times approaching second coming of Christ. So, what I want to look at now is, based on what we've looked at already, and is there a possibility that we're at a different part of Revelations? So, not disputing at all the book of Revelations, or anything that's in it. The only thing I'm actually drawing into question is, where are we actually on the timeline? So, depending on the timeline of events, would place us at a certain point in Revelations. So, based on the history we've been given, the events that have taken place in the history that's been told to us, all of the churches and things and Bibles translated, the whole narrative and context at this point, across the mass majority, is that is the part of Revelation that we are in now, is the point of approaching tribulation, approaching the return of Christ. So, what I want to look at is all the evidence that we might be at a different point in the timeline. Okay? So again, not to reach any conclusions, but just to present a different possibility of time and events and correlate them to now, to again see if we can get a better understanding of where we're at and what's going on. So, from here, let's proceed. So, what we're going to look at now are things from the past, and what can we find that'll give us some other understandings. So, like I just said, in general, based on, the modern church, quotations, You know, we're not including everybody. We're getting the majority mainstream understanding. So there's certainly been plenty of disruption, okay? And without going into great depths, you can do your research on the Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, Emperor Constantine. This is a Roman council where, after the Crusades, the followers of Christ at that time, so I guess we would call them the earliest, before the Roman armies came and killed all of them they could find. They had a collection of books or scrolls that was over 100, close to 110 or so, probably more, but somewhere in that area, over 100. So after all that took place and they were all killed, the Roman army compiled and took all of these books and scrolls, and they burned libraries all over and destroyed the rest of it. In 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea took all of that collection, they went through them systematically, and they removed over 40 of these books and gave us 66 books in the modern canon. So there's plenty more to that story, and you can do your research on that and take it as you will. But with that in mind, let's continue. So again, these are all based on the modern interpretation of where we're at. So we know there's nothing new under the sun. You know, any of these groups are manipulating the masses currently, and have been for a very long time. They're not necessarily telling us what they know or what they actually believe either. So there are some things in the Old of the Bible, in the Old Testament, one of them right in the middle of it. And not saying that the things in this book are not true, but that you do need to have some discernment. Don't take it at face value. Saying there is more to this. You need to pay attention. Okay? So we're looking at timeline manipulation at this point. So what are some examples? Well, our current calendar. December indicates decagon, 10, geometry. It's month 12. November, Novembre, 9, Nova. Month 11. October, octagon, geometry, 8 sides. It's month 10, and so on. Okay? So even within our calendar, words matter. Okay? Words matter. So month 10 is month 12. 9 is 11. 8 is 10. Okay? And when you think about just in the general of what you can see regarding seasons, if you were going to correlate just visibly what you could see, and you were going to say, it appears that the new year begins now. Well, new meaning a new thing. So immediately after winter, when everything dies, things become new again in spring. So at the beginning of spring, things come back to life. So a new season of life begins at the beginning of spring. A couple months off. So based on what we can visibly see with our own eyeballs and experience ourselves in seasons, it appears something is off on our calendar. Okay? So we're operating off of the Gregorian calendar. Pope Gregory. Okay, which, do your own research on that. Why the calendar switch and so on, we'll get into it a little more, but obviously we have some issues. Okay, so we're looking there at timeline. We can't trust the calendar. When we're talking about these institutions, large institutions like this, they're all in ownership. They're all in ownership together. They're umbrellaed and connected financially in all sorts of ways. So we can't just trust them at their word. So some examples of that in the media, as we're aware. I mean, and I'm just grabbing one example of this. You can do some research and go watch a compilation of media fail examples, and you will be shocked with the number of times they've intentionally shown us things on the news that absolutely were not happening or were not what they claimed. And this example here, this was posted in 22, and it was posted as being a power plant in Ukraine that was being attacked by Russia. And this is the poster here on Twitter. And because of this video went viral, hundreds of thousands of shares. It was shared by hundreds of other accounts, and in fact, there were multiple major news outlets that showed this footage and claimed it was a power plant in Ukraine. And it was not. It was a power plant in China. That's what these are. It happened in 2015. That's what the photo's from. But they ran it, and they put it on the major news, and there were dozens of other examples of this over the last 5 years. So, point being, the media doesn't have any issue with showing us stuff that's not true. So, we can't just trust them. They're all owned under one large umbrella. So, if the news is going to report the truth, then split it into 12 pieces and let each of 12 different networks show a different piece of it. You're intentionally dividing the pie so you can intentionally divide the population, because all those different outlets are all financially tied under one group. Pretty much every corporation that you're familiar with is umbrellaed under one of 4 companies. And those 4 companies are majority owned by 3 independent investment LLCs. And those investment LLCs own a third of each other. So they all work for the same people. Okay? Now, regarding history, we have the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages is explained to us, essentially, we just forgot how to write things down. Reading and writing just went out the window for 1,000 years. 1,000 years, Dark Ages, like it just went dark. Like I said, it was a terrible time, though. Terrible things happened. Terrible, dark, gross, and evil things. We don't know much about it. Not much written history. We don't have much documentation. Just 1,000 years, kind of dark. Not really accounted for. We actually forgot how to read and write for 1,000 years. And if that's the case, then how did we figure out again how to read and write 1,000 years later? And then just immediately started documenting history again. All right, guys, well, let's start writing things down again. You know, this might be important. Just blip of 1,000 years that we don't know much about at all. That, as we probably have not ever really thought about that much, but when we really just take a moment to think about it, that seems pretty ludicrous. We just mysteriously quit understanding how to document things for exactly 1,000 years? those are very round numbers in a very strange narrative, and it seems a bit cover story, if you will. So it seems like somebody is trying to make a time period go away or disappear. So what if 1,000 years actually was edited or added to cover up the millennial 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth? Because most, like I said, most of the modern Christian church is not really going in depth into Revelation, and acknowledged by a whole lot of the pastors because they don't understand it. So they just don't go very deep. So for most of church-going folk, as far as their understanding, the tribulation happens, it's terrible times, but there's good things to look forward to. Christ returns, all is well, and, that's a wrap. New heaven, and things are great. Well, that's not how Revelations plays out. There's an eventuality of this, but not in that order. So there's a whole nother block in Revelation that most have not ever really even been aware of, even if they've been in church their whole life. So in the Bible, after the tribulation and the return of Christ, there is a 1,000-year period where Christ reigns on earth, known as the millennial reign. 1,000-year period. So most are not aware of this. So that part happens, and then there's some more stuff that happens. So after this 1,000-year period, the millennial reign of Christ on earth, Satan gets one last hoorah before eventually getting the final reconciliation. So, being that is present and is absolutely a major part of this book, is it possible that they have destroyed and manipulated our timeline and our history so badly that they've actually been hiding a 1,000-year period on purpose to try and account for or make disappear a millennial reign that has already occurred? So again, not drawing conclusions. I just want people to be aware that there's more to this book of Revelation than what most are aware of. And so there are additional things that happen. And knowing that, what evidence might there be that this has potentially happened? Or evidence that points at the timeline manipulation and other things that might give us a different angle on where we might be on the timeline and in the book of Revelation. So, if it already occurred, let's look at some examples. So, if you look closely, these are ancient coins from what would be called the Middle Ages, okay? And I'm only giving you a couple examples here, but there are lots of these. You can look them up and find all kinds of examples of these. Sometimes you can even purchase some that are still available. They're very old. So, point being is, what we're looking at here are the dates. So we're looking for evidence of a time period of 1,000 years where this may have been actually have already taken place. So, on this coin here, we can see there is a saint on it. And on this one, we have cross symbols, okay? So, one being that we would have, if we're looking at a time period where Christ was reigning on earth, the things we would expect on coins saints, Christian symbols, not necessarily graven images of what would be considered graven images of presidents or warriors, or, those would not conform to at least the expectation we would have. But point being, the date appears to be on this coin 1525. But if we look close, lettering is spelled out, right? We have an S and we have an I. That I is identical to what we're seeing appear to be a 1. But it's not a 1. Even if it was a Roman numeral 1, we have numerical 525. But there's no reason to put those together. You wouldn't put a Roman numeral 1 and then follow it with standard numerical numbers. So, clearly, this first indication is an I, not a 1. Same thing on this coin. We have what appears to be 1687. However, if we look close, we can see in English spelling letters H-I-S, okay, alphabet I, identical to the one here. So it's not 1687, it's I 687. So there's other examples. The I is also found. Like I said, there's multiple examples of the I showing up in alphabet on the same coin that's identical to the first notation of the date. So, also considering that at these times, the J would not be present in the alphabet yet. So at that time, it would have been spelled with an I. Isus. The J wasn't present yet, so you would expect, if this was, during this time period, an indication to be an I, not a J. So, there's, again, lots of examples of this. And so we're either looking at potentially Jesus, the year 687 of the reign, or after 687 years after the reign of Christ. But that's the correlation that we're making on this. Like I said, we can't draw there's no factual conclusions to be drawn here, but based on the evidence, the date does not say 1687. Okay? Now that part we can confirm, because the evidence is right in front of us that those are numerical and those are alphabet. All right? So, more examples of this. Boston, 8 miles, 1734, except right below it, alphabet A, alphabet I. This I, identical to this one. I, 734. Again, what other explanation would make sense there? I don't know. But that's why we're looking. Because it certainly doesn't make sense in the way that we have been. They will tell us that says 1734. But right here in front of us, that is not a 1. So, something else is going on. So, I'll show you now the breakdown I'll show you where the actual, biblical process takes place, so you can see it actually in order of operation, right? So, and we're going to look at a whole bunch of, evidence that we have and correlate it to what we would expect the world to look like at these different times. So, if we are talking about after, and Satan was going to be loosed for a short time, so he's got a limited clock to go out and deceive the masses again, one last time. So he's on a clock this time. He's on a timer. So accelerated. Everything's got to be faster, right? So we're going to use that in a context as well. So note that from here as we move down, this has already taken place, right? So the beast and the false prophet have already been cast into the lake of fire at this point, and we're moving forward from there. So, took the old serpent, devil and Satan, bound him 1,000 years, okay? Then cast him in the bottomless pit, deceive the people no more till the 1,000 years are fulfilled. After that, he must be loosed for a little season, okay? So then, this describes saints, those who lived with Christ for 1,000 years, the first resurrection. So, and the saints shall be the priests of God in Christ and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Okay? So, this has taken place, then 1,000-year period has expired. Now Satan has been loosed out of his prison. He shall go out to deceive the people, which are in the four quarters of the earth. Even Gog and Magog will gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. So, once he is loosed, he is going to go out and deceive all people that are in the four quarters of the earth. So, we have to understand, based on what they were describing at that time, how this laid out for them. 4 quarters. So, this is the way that they viewed the earth and how they described it. 4 quarters. Okay? So, the people were in the 4 quarters of the earth. Gog and Magog will gather Satan's army, essentially. So, and after, Gog and Magog are going to gather the armies, and they will circle the camp of the saints, which is here. So, they're going to gather all of the army of Satan from all the 4 quarters, and they will march to circle the camp of the saints after they reside there after the millennial reign has completed. They are in the camp of the saints. So, interestingly enough, a few years ago, I watched a movie because I saw the title and I thought, boy, that's strange. This is the film here. Description on the left is from Wikipedia. So keep in mind, this is from 1954. Okay? Now, you're going to get some correlations here from what we touched on the last video. So we're going to tie in a lot of stuff right now. Like I said, a lot of this seems random until we keep going, and then stuff just presents itself. So, in this movie in 1954, the plot. Unaccountable deadly malfunctions begin occurring at a top-secret government facility under the New Mexico desert, where a space station is being constructed. Okay? Keep that in mind. David Shepard, from the Office of Scientific Investigations in D.C., is called to investigate mysterious deaths. Okay? So, deaths in this construction site are among the laboratory of 150 top scientists that are all gathered together in an underground facility doing space projects. And 150 are due to sabotage. So the deaths are occurring because there's sabotaging of the facility's nuclear Operative Variable Automatic Computer, or the NOVAC. NOVAC controls and coordinates all the equipment in the underground facility. Okay? So if you watched the last video, you probably already see the correlation here. We'll keep going. Remember, this is the name of the film. Eventually, Shepard determines that there is a powerful radio transmitter and receiver secretly built into the NOVAC during its construction in Switzerland, without the knowledge or consent of its designer. So an enemy robot plane with a fiberglass body that does not register on radar has been flying overhead the facility, and it's been beaming precisely focused ultra-high frequency radio signals into the complex of the NOVAC's functions. The computer, in turn, controls Gog and Magog, two huge mobile robots with multiple arms, powerful gripping tools, and other implements. Okay? Like I said, if you watched the last video, we did a little breakdown, and this is a little too strangely correlated. So again, let's tie it back in. CERN is a collaboration of scientists. They're in Switzerland, and they're operating miles underground. So, was this for 1954 some predictive programming or some truth in plain sight describing this that exists in reality here? We'll continue. Like I said, it went up into the plane of the earth, encompassed the tents of the saints about and the beloved city. But fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Okay? So, in summation, they gather up all the armies, they march on the camp of the saints, they gather around it, once they get there, wipe out. And that's a wrap. Okay? So, that is the actual kind of finale of this, based on the book of Revelation. So, that's how it carries out, per the book, in order of operation, okay? So, now let's look at if that had already taken place. So, if that 1,000-year period existed already, what are some of the evidence we'd be looking for? What would the world have looked like during that time period? Energy, architecture, what, if we're looking at the context of what we would think in quote-unquote a perfect world, what would that look like? So, obviously, energy, it would be free energy. It would not be dangerous. It would be clean. There would be it would be perfect in all ways. Energy would not have any of the symptoms it has today. Vehicles, emissions, those things, none of that would exist. If vehicles would run cleanly, they would run off of fuel and energy that would never hurt anything else. It would always be sustainable. So you kind of get the context of what we're looking at here. We're looking for some level of perfection, really. Buildings, construction, architecture would be unbelievable. Engineering, the materials used, everything would be perfectly constructed. Truly magnificent, I guess, would kind of be a description, Sculptures, art, craftsmanship, technicality of precision would be impeccable. Roads, bridges, anything that we can think of would be as perfect as it could be, okay? So, now, let's, say, if there was evidence that all of these things that were just described in a context that kind of sounds like we just described, what if those things did exist before our modern era and were intentionally covered up? And the technology levels we're told that our previous civilizations are, we are at the front of technology as they want us to understand it. We are the most advanced. So what if that's not the case? What if there is evidence that past civilizations were far more advanced, and that there's evidence of amazing things like this all over the world? What would that lead us to? Well, let's look and see. Well, if you haven't noticed already around the news, all over, cities all over the United States and all over the world, they're discovering entire cities under them. And you can see in this one, this is clearly a long established and developed city. There's buildings everywhere, they're huge, right? So beneath it, you can clearly see pillars still intact, standing, that were buried completely, and they're still standing. This stuff up here is going to crumble eventually, but beneath it, still standing. Okay? And this is happening all over the world. They're finding that a lot of this is built on top of something else, and we were never aware of it. There is an entire ancient civilization known as Tartaria that on ancient maps spanned basically the entire known world, but has been removed from all maps and any history that we've been taught. So, let's ask declassified CIA documents, and you can look this up for yourself. I just gave you a snippet. That's a little just to get to the meat. These are all old maps that you're looking at. Obviously, you can see the size. The size and coverage of this is going to all lands, okay? There's landmarks and descriptions everywhere describing this place, Tartaria. So, declassified CIA document. Or let us take the matter of history, which along with religion, language, and literature constitute the core of a people's cultural heritage. Here again, the communists have interfered in a shameless manner. For example, on 9th of August 1944, the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party's Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria, to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten, let us be frank, was to be falsified, in order to eliminate references to Great Russian aggressions and to hide the facts of the real course of Tartar-Russian relations. And in this was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians on orders of the Communist Party have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in a good light. Needless to say, histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed, so that the present and future generations of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past. Okay? There's a couple of side notes to keep in mind, which I will definitely get way into in a video a couple down from now, just to keep it layering in a better order. But even so this is regarding things that happened in the 1940s regarding history. But even all the way up until now, what we understood of the USSR and Russia then, everything that was happening around it, before it, And what our current understanding of modern Russia, from what I've done in research, seems like the whole thing is just wildly inaccurate and has been presented to us in a very certain kind of way, and it doesn't add up at all. So we've obviously got some high-level interests from governments around the world to get rid of this information, because obviously that CIA document is describing some great transgressions of Russia in hiding this history, but did we ever read anything about Tartaria in our education system? No. Are they on our maps? No. Okay, well, it looks like in some way or another, the whole world is somehow collectively interested in not accounting for this civilization that spanned across the entire known world, which is unheard of even today. So, in our history, in major areas that you would find of importance on these old maps, especially in the United States, every major city, at some point, right around the mid-1800s, around 1855 to 59, 60, all the way up into the early 1900s, all the major U.S. cities had some sort of just unbelievably devastating fire that took place. All of them. I'm giving you a handful of examples so you can see. This is the Pelletier fire of 1904 in Sioux City. This is the Great Fire of San Francisco, known as the Ham and Eggs Fire. It's a ridiculous story, if you ask me. Great Chicago Fire. So again, all of these are going to happen within about a 50-year time period, essentially. One by one, all these major cities have some sort of a devastating fire that destroys almost everything. But this is what those cities looked like before. Based on some of the descriptions we were looking at earlier about what type of architecture we might expect, my goodness. I mean, and this is from this time period? Yet, all of this, and like I said, I'm giving you a few examples, structures and buildings like this, and all cities everywhere that looked like this, all had something like this that destroyed most of anything that looked like this. Strangely ironic. Now, of course, there's another part of. So again, we're looking at this as that architecture certainly looks like some stuff we'd expect, right? So let's keep looking. There's another note when you're looking at the idea of, has this already happened? So during the tribulation, mountains tremble for him, the hills melt, and the earth is burnt at his sight, yea, the whole world and all that dwell therein. Hills melt, mountains tremble, earth burnt. Well, what do these look like? Because these are all over the world. Can you imagine what this might have looked like? Because one thing is for certain, somebody didn't come after and build these in, okay? So there certainly have been a lot of try to explain away of this? No. There's too many. You can't build openings in most of these places. Technology at the time, especially based on what they have told us, this would be impossible to do it after. Like they built it into it this way. No. The evidence does not reflect that. It appears some great cataclysm moved Earth and melted rock, hills. So, only a few examples I'm showing you. There are so many more. So many more. Go look for melted mountains, melted hills, melted structure. You will find lots of this. So, is that evidence of something like this that's already happened? So, we're talking about crazy levels of technology also that have been rumored to be the fall of Atlantis. And if you watch the movie Aquaman, they give you a scene where they give you a visual of how Atlantis sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And what they show you are free energy looking devices that kind of look like these. And they got too powerful for them. And they arced out of control. And things started to explode. Towers started to fall. Powerful beams, laser-type beams, started spinning all different directions, cutting things in half, burning things, melting rock. And that's provided an Aquaman explaining how Atlantis sunk. So they might be showing us something there as well, because if we look here, this is Tesla technology. And if you know anything about Tesla, and you can do your research, he understood energy in a different kind of way, and he was actually able to harness electricity directly from the air itself. He didn't even need bulbs connected to a device. He could plug them into the earth, essentially. And he knew how to do this, and he wanted to share free energy. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to sell electricity. So, what seems to be the real possibility is that he did not invent this technology. He rediscovered it. And he learned how to rebuild things that already existed with technology and ideas that had already happened in the past. So when you look at this, and these are his, and we know that they were energy centers. And then we look at existing structures today. They're still here. I mean, look at the way these are constructed. Look at the styles, consistencies with these shapes. These are all over the world. Architecture that looks the same and is amazingly accurate and precise. Construction materials are amazingly immaculate. The precision of some of these buildings is beyond mathematic precision today. We cannot. This is reverse engineered. Essentially, this was one giant block of stone or rock, and they started at the top, and they carved it out to leave this as the remaining. And we're told they did it with hammers and chisels. Okay? But doesn't it look like a temple that would be consistent with temples like these? So, these ancient structures used to be filled with things like this. Giant pipe organs. because like with those times, these buildings were all constructed with architecture and precision and understanding and knowledge that was very systematically done on purpose to create sound resonance, acoustics. So if you walked into a temple, the vibrational frequencies from these giant organs would likely heal the human body. Sound frequency, healing through sound. Do some research on that, and you will absolutely find an abundance of research, and it will blow your mind. The amount of things that can be done with sound. So you think about if you're looking at this from a biblical perspective of creation, creation was started through spoken word. The universe was spoken into existence. So again, that perspective in general is that it is a vibration. So sound is created by vibration, frequency, tone. So the universe was created, was spoken. So vibration. So would you be able to be healed in a healing temple with amazing acoustical constructed buildings that have intentionally created organs that make frequencies and sounds that are healing to the body? Well, within the context of what we're describing of a possibility, yeah, we could definitely expect something like that. So another thing about it is, in most of these places that are still standing, the ones that made it, these have been stripped out of most of them. Gutted. To remove the healing possibilities, and also probably some history. Okay? So, because now we're looking at technology and places, and so when we looked at Tartaria earlier, we're now going to show you a place that kind of sits in what would have been like the heart of that region. And you've probably never heard of this place whatsoever. And this is a place known as Turkmenistan, and the capital is Ashgabat. Now, we don't know anything about this place, nor have we been taught any Tartarian history. However, I've got a close friend that grew up in Pakistan. He knew exactly what I was talking about the second. First time I ever mentioned Tartaria to him, he knew exactly what I was talking about, and he knew there was a lot of history that was hidden and destroyed. He also knew exactly where Turkmenistan was, and Ashgabat, so it was no mystery to him being raised in Pakistan. But there's absolutely no teaching or knowledge of this here. So, Turkmenistan is also a very interesting location because it's technically in Central Asia, but we would kind of think of right on Middle Eastern. And it is bordered by Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan, and Iran to the south, and they are also bordered by the Caspian Sea. So from a strategic location like this is kind of you can't really get into this place easily. This is a very hard place to access. It's also behind mountains, so there's a mountain range between that you can't get there. It's in the middle of the desert. So not a lot of tourists going in and out of there, I guess, is the point. So here's some extra information about that country and kind of the things that it's got a very, regarding communications and tourism, it's got a very North Korea type of stance. They do not allow social media. You can see in 2015, the Turkmenistan government banned all satellite dishes. They fully blocked access for hundreds of independent international media outlets, a lot of which were United States. And any internet access is filtered. Anything, any websites or anything the government objects to, they can block. So YouTube, social media, Facebook, blocked. You can't use VPNs. So they're serious, right? So they don't want information coming in or going out. And interestingly enough, right around the same time, in 1948, and remember the CIA document I read to you earlier, okay? 1948, in Ashgabat, they say that the entire city was basically built of adobe or fired brick. So basically just shanties. And in 1948, there was an earthquake that essentially destroyed the entire city and killed 2/3 of the population. And occupied by the Soviets at that time. So you remember what that document said in the CIA about what the Soviets required all of these Middle Eastern and Muslim countries. They were forced to rewrite history in these areas. So this place was occupied by the Soviets when this took place, okay? And then a rapid 20-year rebuilding plan was put into place, okay? Now, in 1995, Turkmenistan's residents were provided with free natural gas, electricity, and water. And they had that for 25 years until 2018. Free energy, free utilities. 2013, the city was in the Guinness Book of World Record for possessing the world's highest concentration of white marble buildings, and a place that used to all be shanty adobe homes and fired brick. It is the second most expensive city in the world by 2020, and here's what it looks like today. It's pretty incredible. Sparsely populated. Pretty amazing. And this place is hiding in the middle of the desert. And nobody really knows about it at all. And what does it appear that they have here? You can see they certainly have what appear to be power lines. However, what's missing? There's no actual lines. There are no wires. There's nothing connecting these together. All of these buildings, all these structures, have the same types of things. They were all consistent with all the old buildings we saw, all the old Tartarian buildings, and temples, all consistent with Tesla technology and the shapes of his free energy devices. Consistent in all their construction, and they have no wires. So, is this place showing us how advanced the technology really is? And in fact, that throughout regions of that land long ago, it already existed. In fact, in the heart of that region is kind of where it probably was centered. And a large amount of it took place around there, and secrets were hidden and lost, and somebody with a lot of money has created a little private oasis for themselves out in the desert. It's hard to get to. Sounds like an elite getaway that we're not allowed to see. And the technology looks like some of the stuff we would expect to have found if we were looking for evidence of a certain 1,000-year time period, as if some technology was available that people knew about and are even using it right now in plain sight while pretty much being hidden. So, like I said, at this point I think we've established that at least the idea of what we'd expect things to look like if that 1,000-year period took place. And I mean, we definitely have seen evidence that reflects what we would expect. And like I said, you can do an abundance of research at this point on old world history. There's some outstanding YouTube references. Old World with John Levi. He has compiled an incredible amount of photo evidence showing all sorts of unbelievable structures that have been hidden throughout the years and been given cover stories that pretend like we built them, that don't line up with any of the construction from the time period that we were constructing. So the holes in the narrative are massive. And so it looks like there's at least evidence that this theory could have some validity. So, not drawing a conclusion, but it definitely has, the evidence is here that correlates to these ideas. And like I said, here's some information on, the timeline, Council of Nicaea. That way you can kind of give yourself a better understanding of kind of how we got here. And that we kind of got 2/3 of the deck disguised as a whole deck. And that way we're kind of chasing our tail, leaving bits and pieces out, giving us the macro without the micro, things of that nature, so that we're always wandering around looking. And at this point, like I said, evidence is all around us, and it's all over the world. So how else can we explain architecture being that consistent in style and in amazingness all over the world? Would appear to be from the same time. There's no other explanation that we've been given that would explain this. So this is just another possibility. So here are some of those channels where you can find just, I've given you a Reader's Digest of this. The amount of information you can find is mind-boggling. So, just to consider. And there are a whole bunch of references I have provided here that are describing the possibility of that time period already taking place, or references that might give us evidence of that. Now, again, like I said, we kind of have to, we're not disputing whether or not any of this is actually going to happen or will happen. I'm just trying to correlate the possibility of us being in a different part of the timeline. So, main point of these is to look at the context of who's being spoken to, the context of, and directness. What is the priority level? Is this something that immediate? What is the context in the language and how it's being delivered? So, for instance, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Well, if you're looking at that statement in a context of time, well, at hand, well, where are your hands? They're right in front of you. And they're in front of you right now. So, your at hands are present now. So, you have to kind of look at these within the context that they're being presented in. Is this something that's being delivered to people right now in an immediate context of something happening? Or is it describing something that sounds like it should be distant in the future? And is there a specific group of people being spoken to directly at a specific time that's being referenced? And a lot of these really are. So, a lot of them in judgment with this generation. So, when you look at phrases like that and the language implied, this generation, whoever is being spoken to at this moment in time is the context. So, of course, like I said, there's always translation and so on, but there's so many of these that within verbiage are describing things immediate or within the context of the people being spoken to at that moment. So, just something to review to kind of give yourself some context of, well, how many examples of this are there? And when we're talking about disciples, it is told to them that some of you that stand here, which shall not taste death until they have seen the kingdom of God come with power. So saying some of you aren't going to die until this coming. So in our modern context of biblical, we would say that all the saints have been martyred already. So they're not supposed to die, though, until that already occurs. So again, it's just something to contrast, and get some discernment and see how much of this correlates, and if there's a possibility based on all of this and all the other evidence we've looked at, is this a possibility? Is it possible this is where we're at on the timeline? And is it possible that this is actually the part of Revelation that we're actually in? And I just think that all of this collectively gives us a good enough block of evidence to at least worth consideration, for sure. So, and we still have a little more to go, because again, from here, carrying into more of the hidden history and evidence of Tartaria and other very, very notable names in history. And what's the history provided to us in the historical narrative and context about those individuals? And is there anything to the contrary that ties into this other line of narrative that we're looking at? And there's quite a bit. So we will step into that on the next one. So we'll wrap this one here, and peace and love, my friends.